A widowed billionaire CEO disguises himself as a poor man, searching for a genuine mother for his son. But what this young waitress does next leaves him completely stunned. Comment your city below and hit subscribe to join our global community. This story has an ending that will blow your mind. Daddy, why don't I have a mommy like the other kids? The question hit Nathan Cole harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He stood frozen in the doorway of his son's bedroom, his hand still resting on the light switch, his heart suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated little Ethan's face, those wide, innocent eyes that looked so much like his late wife's, filled with a confusion that no 5-year-old should ever have to carry. Nathan swallowed hard, fighting to keep his composure. He crossed the room slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, and sat down on the edge of his son's bed. The expensive silk of his custom-tailored suit seemed absurdly out of place against the superhero-themed bedsheets. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of dark hair from Ethan's forehead, buying himself a few precious seconds to find words that wouldn't shatter them both. "Your mommy," Nathan began, his voice catching in his throat. He cleared it and tried again, forcing steadiness into his tone. "Your mommy loved you more than anything in this world, buddy. She's watching over you from heaven. She's your guardian angel now." Ethan's lower lip trembled slightly. "But Tommy's mom picks him up from school, and she makes him cookies, and she reads him stories every night." The little boy's voice grew smaller with each word. "I want someone to do that for me too, Daddy. I want a real mommy I can hug." Nathan felt something crack deep inside his chest. For 3 years, he had poured himself into building his empire, into becoming one of the youngest billionaire CEOs in the country, telling himself that he was doing it all for Ethan, that providing every material comfort would somehow fill the void that Sarah's death had left behind. But sitting here now, looking into his son's pleading eyes, he realized how spectacularly he had failed. "What if I told you," Nathan said slowly, an idea forming in his mind, even as he spoke the words, "that Daddy is going to try very hard to find you someone special, someone who could love you just as much as I do?" Ethan's eyes widened with a hope so pure it was almost painful to witness. "Really, Daddy? You promise?" Nathan pulled his son into a tight embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of his children's shampoo, feeling the small arms wrap around his neck with desperate strength. "I promise, buddy. I promise I'm going to find you someone real. Someone who loves you for you, not for anything else." That night, long after Ethan had finally drifted off to sleep, Nathan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring out at the glittering Manhattan skyline that stretched endlessly before him. The city that never slept was alive with lights and movement, millions of lives playing out their stories far below, and yet he had never felt more alone. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails from board members, messages from executives awaiting his decisions, calendar reminders for meetings that would shape the futures of thousands of employees. Nathan Cole, the man whose business acumen was legendary, whose mere word could move markets and make or break careers, couldn't even give his own son the one thing he truly wanted. He thought about the parade of women who had passed through his life since Sarah's death, the socialites who saw him as a prize to be won, the executives who viewed a relationship as a strategic merger, the actresses and models who couldn't hide their excitement at being photographed on his arm. Every single one of them had looked at Ethan as an inconvenience, an obstacle, something to be tolerated in exchange for access to the Cole fortune. The memory of last month's disaster still burned in his mind. He had introduced Ethan to Vanessa, a gorgeous marketing executive who had seemed perfect on paper. But when Ethan had accidentally spilled juice on her designer dress, she had dropped her facade completely. The look of disgust on her face, the sharp words she had bitten back, the way she had treated his son like a nuisance afterward, it had shown Nathan exactly what kind of person she truly was beneath the polished surface. That was when he had realized the fundamental problem. Everyone knew who Nathan Cole was. Everyone knew about the billions, the private jets, the influence that came with his name. How could he ever hope to find someone genuine when the very sight of him triggered calculations about wealth and status rather than authentic connection? Nathan's reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, a handsome man in his prime, dark hair still perfectly styled even at this late hour, strong jaw set in a determined line. But his grey eyes held a weariness that no amount of success could cure. He had conquered the business world, but he was losing the war that truly mattered. "Sir?" The soft voice of Margaret, the elderly housekeeper who had been with his family for decades, interrupted his thoughts. "Is everything all right? I noticed your light was still on." Nathan turned to face her, seeing the concern etched in her kind features. Margaret had been the closest thing to a mother figure Ethan had known, but at 72, she couldn't give him the future he deserved. She couldn't be the mother he was crying out for. "I need to make a change, Margaret," Nathan said quietly. "I need to find Ethan a real mother, but not like this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. "Not with all of this." Margaret studied him for a long moment, her wise eyes seeming to understand what he wasn't saying. "You're thinking of looking where people won't recognize you." "I'm thinking," Nathan said, the plan crystallizing in his mind, "of becoming someone else entirely. Someone ordinary. Someone who can see how people really treat others when there's nothing to be gained." The next morning, Nathan made a series of phone calls that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He appointed his most trusted vice president as acting CEO, citing personal matters that required his full attention. He instructed his driver, his assistants, and his security detail to take an extended paid leave. He cancelled every meeting, every gala, every obligation on his calendar for the next month. And then Nathan Cole, billionaire, disappeared. In his place stood a different man entirely. Gone were the custom Italian suits, replaced by worn jeans and a simple flannel shirt that he had purchased from a thrift store, an experience so foreign to him that he had stood in the unfamiliar aisles for nearly 20 minutes, unsure of how anything worked. His luxury watch had been swapped for a cheap digital one. His sleek sports car had been traded for a modest used sedan that made concerning noises every time he started the engine. Nathan studied his reflection in the cracked mirror of the small apartment he had rented in Brooklyn, a far cry from his Manhattan penthouse. The man looking back at him seemed like a stranger, without the trappings of wealth, without the confidence that came from knowing the world would bend to his will. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, exactly what he needed to be. But he hadn't anticipated how difficult this would be. The first diner he walked into, he had instinctively headed for the best table only to be told it was reserved. He had fumbled with the unfamiliar menu, uncertain how to order without someone there to anticipate his preferences. When the bill came, he had nearly pulled out his black Amex before remembering to use the prepaid debit card he had loaded with a modest amount. It was humbling in ways he hadn't expected, and Nathan realized, with a growing sense of shame, how disconnected he had become from the reality that most people lived every single day. His search for a potential mother for Ethan had been frustrating thus far. He had visited coffee shops where the baristas were too busy flirting with their phones to even acknowledge him. He had tried parks where mothers gathered, but their conversations had been filled with complaints about their children and comparisons about whose husband made more money. He had even attempted online dating with his new identity, only to find the same superficiality he had always encountered, just dressed in different clothes. Nearly 2 weeks into his experiment, Nathan was beginning to lose hope. Perhaps genuine kindness was rarer than he had thought. Perhaps there was no one out there who could love his son unconditionally. No one who would see Ethan as a gift rather than a burden. And then on a rainy Tuesday evening he walked into Rosie's diner. The place was nothing special. A classic American diner with red vinyl booths that had seen better days, a long counter with chrome stools, and the comforting smell of coffee and home cooking that seemed to permeate every surface. A neon sign flickered in the window, and the floor tiles were worn from decades of footsteps. It was exactly the kind of place Nathan Cole, billionaire, would never have been caught dead in. But Nathan Cole, ordinary struggling father, found something unexpectedly comforting about it. "Welcome to Rosie's," a warm voice called out, and Nathan looked up to see a young woman emerging from behind the counter, her bright smile seeming to illuminate the entire room. She was beautiful in an unstudied way, long chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, green eyes that sparkled with genuine warmth, an apron tied around her waist that had clearly seen plenty of hard work. "Sit anywhere you like. I'll be right with you." Nathan slid into a booth by the window, watching as she efficiently cleared a nearby table while simultaneously refilling another customer's coffee. There was a natural grace to her movements, an ease that suggested she found genuine satisfaction in caring for others. When an elderly man at the counter struggled to read the menu through his thick glasses, she didn't just read him the specials. She sat down beside him and patiently went through each item, asking about his preferences and making personalized recommendations. This was different. This was something Nathan hadn't seen in a very long time. "All right," she said, suddenly appearing at his table with that same radiant smile. "I'm Victoria. What can I get you tonight? And fair warning, the meatloaf is absolutely incredible, but only if you're hungry enough to handle a portion that's basically made for 2 people. Nathan found himself smiling back despite himself. "Victoria, that's a beautiful name." "My grandmother's," she said, and something soft flickered across her features. "She always said I had to live up to it, so I try my best. Now, what'll it be?" He ordered the meatloaf, partly because of her recommendation, partly because he wanted to see if she was right. As she walked away to put in his order, Nathan felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Little did he know, this moment would change everything. And before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your city in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more. Now, let's see what happens next. Nathan returned to Rosie's diner every day for the next week. At first, he told himself it was purely about observation, about gathering data the same way he would approach any major business decision. He would sit in the same booth by the window, order something different from the menu each time and watch. He watched how Victoria moved through the restaurant with an efficiency that seemed almost choreographed. He watched how she remembered not just orders but names, preferences, the small details of regular customers' lives that showed she actually listened when they spoke. But somewhere along the way, his clinical observation had transformed into something far more personal. He found himself looking forward to her smile when she spotted him walking through the door. He noticed the way her laugh seemed to brighten the entire room. He caught himself wondering about the story behind the occasional sadness that flickered across her eyes when she thought no one was watching. "You're becoming quite the regular," Victoria said on his 5th visit, sliding into the seat across from him with 2 cups of coffee. Her shift had just ended, and the evening rush had died down to a comfortable quiet. "Most people don't come back this many times, unless they're either running from something or looking for something. Which one is it for you?" Nathan wrapped his hands around the warm mug, genuinely caught off guard by her perceptiveness. In his world of business negotiations and strategic conversations, he had grown accustomed to people seeing only what he wanted them to see. Yet this woman, this waitress in a modest diner, had looked right through his carefully constructed facade. "Maybe I just really like the meatloaf," he offered, attempting a deflection with a smile. Victoria's green eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and understood. "The meatloaf is good, but it's not that good. Nobody looks at meatloaf the way you look at." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Actually, I can't quite figure out what you're looking at, but it's definitely not the food." Nathan set down his coffee cup, considering how much truth he could afford to reveal without exposing his entire deception. "I'm looking for something I lost a long time ago," he said finally, "something I'm not even sure exists anymore." "And you think you might find it here? In a diner where the ceiling leaks when it rains and the jukebox only plays songs from 30 years ago?" There was gentle teasing in her voice, but also genuine curiosity. "I think," Nathan said slowly, choosing each word with care, "that I've spent a lot of years looking in all the wrong places. Maybe it's time to try somewhere different." Victoria was quiet for a moment, something shifting in her expression. Then she smiled, not the professional customer service smile he had seen her give others, but something more real, more vulnerable. "Well, you picked a good place to start. Rosie's has a way of showing people who they really are. Can't hide behind fancy clothes or impressive titles here. The coffee and the company strip all that away. Before Nathan could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and a young boy of about 8 years old came rushing in, a backpack bouncing on his shoulders, and worry etched across his small face. "Victoria, Victoria!" he called out, weaving between tables until he reached them. "My mom forgot to pick me up again, and the after-school lady said I couldn't stay, and I didn't know where else to go, and—" His words tumbled over each other in a breathless rush, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. Nathan watched, fascinated, as Victoria's entire demeanor transformed. She slid out of the booth and knelt down to the boy's level, her hands gentle on his shoulders, her voice soft and reassuring. Hey, Marcus, slow down. Take a breath for me, okay? That's it. Good boy. Now your mom forgot again?" Marcus nodded miserably. "She was supposed to come at 3, and then I waited and she never came." Something dark flickered across Victoria's face, a flash of anger carefully controlled, but her voice remained nothing but warmth and safety. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you something to eat because I bet you're starving, and then we're going to figure out where your mom is together. Does that sound like a plan?" The boy's tears receded slightly, replaced by a tentative hope. "Can I have chicken fingers?" "You can have all the chicken fingers you want." Victoria stood and took his hand, leading him toward the counter. She glanced back at Nathan with an apologetic smile. "Duty calls. Rain check on the conversation." Nathan nodded, but his attention was fixed on what unfolded over the next hour. He watched Victoria prepare a plate of food for Marcus, watched her help him with his homework, while making sure the other customers were taken care of. He watched her make phone call after phone call, her expression growing increasingly concerned, until finally she tracked down the boy's mother, who, from what Nathan could overhear, offered nothing but slurred excuses. What struck Nathan most deeply was the way Victoria handled it all. There was no judgment in her voice when she finally spoke to Marcus about his mother, no pity that might have made the boy feel ashamed. Instead, there was just steady, unconditional kindness, the kind that created a safe space for a child to simply be a child, even when the adults in his life had failed him. This was what he had been searching for. This was the quality he wanted for Ethan. Nathan returned to his small Brooklyn apartment that night, with his mind racing. He had found someone extraordinary, but now what? He couldn't simply reveal who he was and present her with a job offer as his son's potential mother. That would be the height of absurdity, not to mention incredibly presumptuous, and yet how else could he proceed without deepening the deception that was already weighing on his conscience? The next evening, Nathan made a decision. He needed more information, more understanding of who Victoria really was beneath the surface kindness, and the only way to get that was to become more than just a regular customer. He needed to become a friend. "You look like you have something on your mind," Victoria observed, as she refilled his coffee. The dinner rush was winding down, and the comfortable fatigue of a long shift had settled into her features, somehow making her even more beautiful. "I was thinking about yesterday," Nathan admitted. "About Marcus. Does that happen often?" Victoria sighed, sliding into the seat across from him again. "More often than it should. His mother has. Problems. Addiction. Marcus ends up here a lot when things get bad at home. Rosie, the owner, she lets him stay, gives him food, makes sure he's safe until we can figure something out." "That's incredibly kind of you, both of you." "It's just what you do," Victoria said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "When a kid needs help, you help. You don't stop to calculate whether it's convenient or what you might get out of it. At least that's how my grandmother raised me." Nathan leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Your grandmother seems like she was an important person in your life." "She raised me." Victoria's eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "My parents were never really in the picture. Dad left before I was born, and Mum, she couldn't handle having a kid, I guess. Dropped me off with Grandma Rose when I was 3 and never looked back. But Grandma, she was everything. Taught me how to cook, how to treat people, how to find joy in the small things. She's the reason I am who I am." "Was?" Nathan asked gently. "She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer." Victoria's voice was steady, but he could see the grief that still lingered beneath the surface. "That's actually why I work here. Rosie was her best friend. When Grandma died and I had nowhere to go, Rosie gave me a job and a purpose, said I was the granddaughter she never had. This place, these people, they're my family now." Nathan felt his heart constrict with a mixture of admiration and guilt. Here was a woman who had faced abandonment and loss, who had every reason to be bitter and closed off, and instead she had chosen to become a beacon of warmth and generosity. Meanwhile, he sat across from her wearing a disguise, pretending to be something he wasn't, using her openness to evaluate whether she was worthy of his son. What kind of man did that make him? "I'm sorry about your grandmother," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "She sounds like she was an incredible woman, and she clearly passed that on to you." Victoria smiled, a mix of sadness and gratitude. "She always said that kindness is the only thing in this world that multiplies when you give it away. I try to live by that." "I think you succeed." Nathan paused, wrestling with himself, then added, "I have a son, he's 5. His mother passed away when he was 2. I've been trying to figure out how to give him the kind of love and stability that it sounds like your grandmother gave you. It's not easy." It was the most honest thing he had said since beginning this charade, and Victoria's expression softened with genuine empathy. "I can't imagine how hard that must be. Being a single parent, dealing with your own grief while trying to help a child who's too young to understand why his mother is gone." She reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. "For what it's worth, the fact that you're worried about it means you're already doing better than a lot of parents out there." Nathan looked down at her hand on his, feeling the warmth of human connection he had denied himself for far too long. In that moment, he wanted desperately to tell her the truth, to confess that he was a billionaire playing pretend, that he had been watching her like some kind of audition, that everything about his presence here was built on lies. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed more time to be sure. He needed to see how she would react to Ethan, whether the chemistry he felt was real or manufactured by his own desperate hope. "Thank you," he said instead, his voice rough with emotions he couldn't fully express. "That means more than you know." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan would come to the diner most evenings, always during Victoria's shifts. They would talk during her breaks, sometimes about light topics like favorite movies or childhood memories, sometimes about deeper subjects like loss and dreams and what it meant to build a life worth living. With each conversation, Nathan found himself more captivated, not just by her kindness but by her intelligence, her humor, her resilience. He learned that she was saving money to take night classes, hoping to eventually become a social worker so she could help children like Marcus on a larger scale. He learned that she volunteered at a local shelter on her days off, serving meals and playing games with kids whose situations made his own childhood of privilege feel almost obscene. He learned that she had a weakness for terrible puns, that she could recite entire scenes from classic films, that she believed in second chances with a faith that bordered on the miraculous, and he learned with growing certainty that he was falling for her. Not as a potential mother for Ethan, though she would be extraordinary in that role, but as a woman, as a person whose very presence made him want to be better, to strip away the layers of corporate armor he had built around his heart, and remember what it felt like to simply be human. But how could he pursue something real when everything she knew about him was a lie? The answer came unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, when Nathan made a decision that would change everything. He brought Ethan to the diner. It was a calculated risk. His son might say something that would expose the truth, might mention their real home or the nannies or any number of details that would shatter his carefully constructed identity. But Nathan needed to see how Victoria would interact with his child. He needed to know if the connection he imagined was real or merely wishful thinking born of desperation. "Remember, buddy," Nathan said as they walked toward the diner's entrance, crouching down to meet Ethan's excited eyes. "This is our special adventure. We're pretending to be regular people, okay? Like superheroes with secret identities." Ethan's face lit up with the thrill of conspiracy. "Like Batman? Batman pretends to be Bruce Wayne." Nathan smiled, ignoring the irony that in his case the billionaire was the disguise. Exactly like Batman, so we don't talk about our big house or Margaret or any of that. This is our undercover mission. Got it, Daddy. Ethan whispered loudly, giving an exaggerated wink that was so adorable Nathan felt his heart melt. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and Nathan felt his pulse quicken as he scanned the restaurant for Victoria. She was behind the counter, laughing at something Rosie had said, her face bright with genuine joy. When she spotted Nathan, her smile widened, and then her eyes dropped to the small figure holding his hand, and something profound shifted in her expression. "Well, well," Victoria said, approaching them with that warm smile that had become the highlight of Nathan's days. "You must be the famous son I've heard so much about. Let me guess. You're about 5 years old, you love superheroes, and your dad says you're the bravest kid in the whole world. Am I right?" Ethan stared up at her with wide, awestruck eyes. "How did you know all that?" "Because your dad talks about you every single time he comes here," Victoria said, kneeling down to his level in that same graceful way Nathan had seen her do with Marcus. "He's very proud of you, and between you and me, I think he misses you a lot when he's here eating meatloaf without you." Nathan watched as his son's cautious expression melted into a shy smile. Ethan was normally reserved around strangers, a result, Nathan knew, of being surrounded by people who treated him like an accessory to his father's wealth, rather than a person in his own right. But something about Victoria seemed to immediately put him at ease. "I like your hair," Ethan said softly. "It's the same color as the horse in my favorite book." Victoria laughed, delighted. "A horse, huh? That's the best compliment I've ever gotten. I'm Victoria, by the way. And you are?" "Ethan." He paused, then added with endearing seriousness, "That means strong in Hebrew. My mommy picked it before I was born." Something flickered across Victoria's face, a shadow of understanding that spoke to her own experience with loss. She glanced up at Nathan, and in that brief exchange, he saw a depth of compassion that nearly undid him. "That's a perfect name for you," Victoria said softly. "You look very strong to me. Now how about I get you and your dad the best table in the house, and you can tell me all about your favorite superheroes while I bring you some chocolate milk." The next 2 hours were a revelation. Nathan watched as Victoria divided her attention between her regular duties and their table, always returning with something special for Ethan. A paper placemat with crayons so he could draw, an extra cookie, "because you've been so patient," questions about his life that were thoughtful and engaging without being intrusive. But what truly amazed Nathan was how Ethan blossomed under her attention. His normally quiet son became animated, telling stories about his toys, asking questions about the diner, even attempting one of his terrible knock-knock jokes that made Victoria laugh as if it were the funniest thing she had ever heard. At one point, Ethan asked to use the bathroom, and Victoria offered to show him where it was since the diner's layout could be confusing. Nathan watched them walk away hand in hand, his son chattering happily about something, Victoria nodding with genuine interest. And in that moment he could see it so clearly, a future where this woman was part of their lives, where Ethan had someone to hold his hand through all the moments that Nathan couldn't navigate alone. "You're staring at her like she hung the moon." Nathan startled, turning to find Rosie standing beside his table, a knowing smile on her weathered face. The elderly woman had a presence that commanded attention despite her small stature, and eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. "I'm sorry," Nathan managed. "Victoria," Rosie said, settling into the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. "I've been watching you watch her for weeks now, and I've been watching her light up every time you walk through that door. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer." Nathan braced himself. "Okay. What are your intentions with my girl?" The directness of the question caught him off guard, but he found himself respecting her for it. This was a woman who protected the people she loved, who didn't dance around difficult conversations. She reminded him of Margaret. "I'm not sure I know how to answer that," Nathan admitted. "Everything I've told her, told both of you about my life, it's not the whole truth." Rosie's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" Nathan took a deep breath. He could lie, could deflect, could continue the charade. But sitting here, in this honest little diner that had stripped away so many of his defenses, he found he couldn't do it anymore. At least not entirely. "I'm not a struggling single father working an ordinary job," he said quietly. I'm significantly more than that, financially. I came here pretending to be someone else because I wanted to find someone who would love my son for who he is, not for what I could give them. I've been using a false identity because everyone I've ever met treats us differently once they know the truth about my situation. Rosie studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. So you're rich. Very. And you've been lying to Victoria. Nathan winced at the bluntness of it. Yes, though I prefer to think of it as withholding information. Lying, Rosie repeated firmly. Call it what it is. You've been lying to a woman who has been lied to and abandoned by everyone she's ever trusted. Her father, her mother, every person who was supposed to protect her. And now you come along pretending to be something you're not, making her care about you under false pretenses. That's not, Nathan started, but Rosie held up a hand. I'm not finished. Here's what I see. I see a man who's been coming here every day for weeks, who lights up when he talks to her, who brought his son here today and watched them together with the kind of hope that breaks my heart. I see someone who's doing a terrible thing for what might be a good reason. She leaned forward. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell her the truth, all of it, soon. Because if she finds out some other way, and she will, these things always come out, you'll lose her forever. And from what I've seen, that would be a tragedy for both of you. Before Nathan could respond, Victoria returned with Ethan, the little boy now sporting a paper crown that she had apparently fashioned for him in the back. Look, Daddy, Victoria made me a king. Nathan forced a smile, his mind reeling from Rosie's words. I can see that. It's a very handsome crown. Fit for a very handsome prince, Victoria agreed, ruffling Ethan's hair affectionately. Rosie, are you bothering my customers again? Just making friends, Rosie said innocently, pushing herself up from the seat. You know me. Can't resist a good conversation. She shot Nathan a meaningful look. Remember what I said. As the afternoon wore on, Nathan found himself paralyzed by indecision. Every moment with Victoria and Ethan felt precious, watching his son laugh and play and open up in ways he hadn't seen since Sarah was alive. But Rosie's words echoed in his mind, a constant reminder that this beautiful bubble was built on a foundation of lies. He's amazing, Victoria said softly, watching Ethan color a picture at the counter where Rosie was keeping him entertained. She had taken her break and was sitting across from Nathan in what had become their spot. You can see so much of you in him, the way he gets serious when he's concentrating, the way his nose crinkles when he laughs. He has his mother's eyes, Nathan said without thinking, and her kindness. I see her in him every day. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Your wife. What was she like? The question opened a door that Nathan usually kept firmly closed, but something about Victoria's gentle presence made him want to share, to honor Sarah's memory by speaking her name aloud. She was. He searched for words adequate to describe the woman he had loved, the woman whose death had nearly destroyed him. She was the first person who ever saw me, really saw me, and didn't want anything from me except to be seen in return. We met in college, before I had money, before any of the success. She loved me when I had nothing, and she kept loving me the same way when everything changed. She used to say that the most important things in life are the ones you can't put a price tag on. He smiled sadly. She would have loved this place. She sounds wonderful. She was. And losing her. Nathan's voice caught. I've spent 3 years trying to fill the hole she left behind. Throwing myself into work, building an empire, telling myself that if I could just achieve enough it wouldn't hurt so much. But it always hurts. And my son, he's been paying the price for my inability to deal with my own grief. Victoria reached across and took his hand, her touch warm and steady. Grief isn't something you get over, Nathan. It's something you learn to carry. And from what I can see, you're carrying it with a lot more grace than you give yourself credit for. Ethan is happy, healthy, and clearly loves you more than anything. That doesn't happen by accident. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something crack open in his chest. This woman, who had known her own share of loss and abandonment, who had every reason to be guarded and suspicious, was offering him compassion without condition. She didn't know about his billions, his penthouse, his private jets. She saw only a struggling single father trying to do right by his son, and she was choosing to care about him anyway. He wanted to deserve that care. He wanted to be the man she thought he was. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." The words came out before he could stop them, driven by a desperate need to stop lying to someone who had been so honest with him. But before he could continue, a commotion erupted from the counter. Ethan had knocked over a glass of water in his enthusiasm, and it had splashed all over his paper crown and the drawings he had been working on. His face crumpled in immediate distress, tears welling up in his eyes. "My crown! My pictures!" he wailed, the kind of heartbroken cry that only a young child could produce. Victoria was on her feet in an instant, crossing to the counter with quick, purposeful strides. She knelt beside Ethan, pulling napkins from the dispenser to blot the water damage. Hey, it's okay, little king," she soothed. "Look, see? The crown is just a little wet. It'll dry, and you know what? While it's drying, we can make an even better one. A super crown, what do you say?" Ethan sniffled. "Really? Really, and I'll tell you a secret." Victoria leaned in conspiratorially. "The best crowns are the ones that have been through adventures. Rain makes them stronger. So now your crown has a story." Nathan watched as his son's tears transformed into wonder, as Victoria's gentle words turned a small tragedy into an opportunity for imagination. She guided Ethan through creating a new crown, while carefully preserving the original, talking the whole time about how kings needed to be brave and patient and kind. This was it, Nathan realized. This was the quality he had been searching for, the instinct to nurture, to comfort, to transform difficult moments into lessons and adventures. This was what Ethan needed. This was what Nathan himself needed. And he was going to lose it all when she discovered the truth. The following weeks deepened both Nathan's hope and his despair in equal measure. He continued bringing Ethan to the diner on weekends, and each visit strengthened the bond between his son and Victoria in ways that simultaneously filled him with joy and tightened the knot of guilt in his stomach. Ethan had started asking about the lady with the pretty hair every single day. He drew pictures of the three of them together, stick figures holding hands outside a building that bore a suspicious resemblance to Rosie's diner. He talked about Victoria's stories, Victoria's jokes, Victoria's magic way of making chocolate milk taste better than anywhere else. "Daddy," Ethan said one night as Nathan tucked him into bed, "is Victoria going to be my friend forever?" Nathan smoothed his son's hair back from his forehead, struggling to find an answer. "I hope so, buddy. I really hope so. I want her to come to my birthday party," Ethan continued, his voice getting drowsy. "And to Christmas, and to the park. I want her to be there for everything." "We'll see," Nathan managed, his heart breaking at the hope in his child's voice. "Now go to sleep, little king." But as Ethan's eyes drifted closed, Nathan remained sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the paper crowns that now decorated his son's dresser, souvenirs from every visit to the diner, each one more elaborate than the last. Victoria had made every single one, treating the creation as a special ritual that Ethan now looked forward to more than the food itself. How had he let this go so far? What had started as a search for a potential mother for his son had become something far more complicated. He was in love with her, truly deeply in love in a way he hadn't thought possible since losing Sarah, and his son was becoming attached in ways that would devastate him if things fell apart. The guilt was becoming unbearable. It was during their next visit that Nathan learned about the cooking competition. Victoria mentioned it casually as she refilled his coffee, her voice carefully neutral in a way that immediately caught his attention. "There's this thing coming up," she said, keeping her eyes on the stream of coffee. "Probably nothing. Probably stupid to even think about it. What kind of thing?" Victoria hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him with a sigh. Ethan was at the counter again, helping Rosie sort napkins into holders with the intense focus that only a 5-year-old could bring to such a task. "It's a cooking competition," she explained. "Local chefs, amateur cooks, anyone who wants to enter. First prize is $50,000, and a scholarship to culinary school. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. I've always dreamed of going to culinary school, learning to really cook, not just make diner food, maybe opening my own place someday. But it's just a dream. The entry fee alone is more than I can afford right now. Nathan's mind immediately began calculating. $50,000 was nothing to him. He spent more than that on a single business dinner with potential investors. He could pay her entry fee without even noticing it. He could fund her entire culinary education and still have billions left over. But that would mean revealing who he really was, and once he did that, everything would change. "How much is the entry fee?" he asked carefully. $500, plus the cost of ingredients, which they don't cover. Victoria shook her head. "It's okay, really. I've got enough dreams to keep me going without chasing this one. Besides, who's going to watch the diner while I'm off playing chef?" "Victoria." Nathan reached across and took her hand before he could stop himself. The contact sent electricity through his skin, and from the slight widening of her eyes, he knew she felt it too. "If this is your dream, you should chase it. Dreams are too precious to let go of because of practical obstacles." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Easy for you to say. You don't have to choose between dreams and rent." The comment stung more than she could know. Because she was right. He didn't have to make those choices. He had never had to make those choices. And yet here he was, pretending to understand struggles he had never experienced, while holding back the resources that could solve her problems in an instant. "Let me help," he said impulsively. "I have some savings. I can—" "No." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm, and she withdrew her hand. "Absolutely not. You're a single dad barely getting by. I've seen your car, Nathan. I've seen your clothes. You need that money for Ethan, not for my silly cooking dreams." "It's not silly. The answer is no." She smiled to soften the rejection. "But thank you for offering. It means more than you know." Nathan wanted to argue, to insist, to find some way to help without revealing the truth, but he could see the pride in her eyes, the same fierce independence that had drawn him to her in the first place. She would never accept charity, especially from someone she perceived as struggling just as much as she was. The lie was becoming a prison of his own making. That night, Nathan made a decision. He couldn't give her the money directly. She would never accept it. But he could enter her in the competition anonymously. He could pay her entry fee through a third party, perhaps convince Rosie to pretend it was a prize from some fictional local business program. He could give her this chance without her ever knowing it came from him. It felt wrong even as he planned it. More manipulation, more deception, more treating her like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be honest with. But the alternative, watching her give up on her dream when he had the power to help, felt even worse. Nathan contacted his assistant the next morning, breaking his self-imposed isolation for the first time since beginning this experiment. He arranged for the anonymous entry, for the ingredients she would need to be delivered as prizes from a radio contest she didn't remember entering, for every obstacle to be quietly removed from her path. It was the act of a billionaire, not of the struggling single father she believed him to be, and every time he saw her confusion and delight at her apparent good luck, the knife of guilt twisted deeper. "The strangest thing happened," Victoria told him a week later, her eyes shining with excitement and suspicion in equal measure. "Someone entered me in the cooking competition, paid my fee and everything, and then today a delivery truck showed up with all these incredible ingredients, flour, butter, chocolate, things I could never afford, and the driver said, 'I won a radio contest, but I never entered any contest.'" Nathan forced surprise onto his face. "That's incredible. Maybe you have a secret admirer." "It's suspicious is what it is," but her excitement was winning out over her wariness. "Rosie thinks it's fate. She says the universe is telling me to stop making excuses and just go for it. Maybe Rosie's right." Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Nathan felt certain she could see right through him. But then she shook her head and laughed. "I don't believe in fate, but I do believe in taking opportunities when they appear, even if I don't understand where they came from. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to compete." "That's amazing." Nathan's smile was genuine, even if its source was complicated. "I know you're going to be incredible." "Will you come?" To the competition, I mean? Victoria bit her lip, suddenly vulnerable. I know it's a lot to ask, and you'd have to find someone to watch Ethan, but I'd really like you to be there. You've become important to me, Nathan. You and Ethan both. The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. He had become important to her. A fabrication, a lie, a man who didn't exist. The real Nathan Cole was a billionaire who had been watching her like a potential employee, evaluating her suitability for a role she didn't even know she was auditioning for. How could he let her care about someone who wasn't real? Of course I'll be there, he heard himself say. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Over the following weeks, Nathan watched Victoria prepare for the competition with an intensity that left him in awe. She practiced recipes late into the night, perfecting dishes that made the diner's regular offerings taste like cardboard in comparison. She studied technique from borrowed library books, taught herself plating from magazine photographs, transformed the diner's modest kitchen into a training ground for her dreams. And through it all, Nathan found himself falling deeper and deeper in love. He loved the flower she often forgot to brush from her cheek. He loved the way she muttered to herself while cooking, having entire conversations with ingredients as if they could hear her. He loved how she would taste something, close her eyes in concentration, then reach for exactly the right spice to make it perfect. He loved her determination, her resilience, her refusal to accept anything less than her absolute best. He loved her, and he was going to lose her. One evening, as the diner was closing and Ethan was napping in a booth after a long day of helping Victoria practice, she sat down across from Nathan with an exhausted but satisfied smile. I think I've finally figured out my main dish, she said. Grandmother's secret stuffed chicken recipe, the one she never wrote down, that she taught me by making me cook it with her over and over until my hands remembered even when my brain forgot. I've been trying to recreate it for years and I think I've finally got it. Your grandmother's recipe? Nathan asked softly. Are you sure you want to share something so personal with strangers? Victoria's eyes grew misty. That's exactly why I want to use it. Grandma Rose always said food was love made visible, that when you cook for someone, you're giving them a piece of your soul. She taught me that the best meals aren't just about technique or expensive ingredients. They're about putting your whole heart on the plate and trusting that someone will recognize what you've given them. She reached across and took his hand, and Nathan felt his heart stutter in his chest. You've helped me remember that, you and Ethan. Coming here every day, sharing your story with me, letting me be part of your lives. You've reminded me what it feels like to cook for people I care about. Whatever happens in this competition, I want you to know that you've given me something precious. Nathan looked into her green eyes and saw everything he had ever wanted. Love, acceptance, a partner who saw him rather than his wealth, a mother for his son who would love Ethan with the same fierce tenderness she showed to every child who crossed her path. And he saw himself losing it all because everything she felt for him was based on a lie. Victoria. His voice was rough with emotion. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago. She squeezed his hand, her expression open and trusting. You can tell me anything, Nathan. You know that. He opened his mouth to confess, to finally speak the truth that had been burning inside him for so long. But before he could form the words, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and her face lit up. It's the competition committee. They've announced the final challenge theme. She read the message, her excitement building with every word. The final round will be soul food, dishes that tell a personal story, that reveal something true about the chef who created them. She looked up at Nathan with tears in her eyes. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Grandma's recipe was meant for this. Nathan closed his eyes briefly, letting the moment of confession slip away. How could he shatter her joy right now? How could he destroy the hope shining in her face just when she was on the verge of achieving her dream? He would tell her after the competition, he promised himself. After she won, because she would win, he was certain of it, he would sit her down and tell her everything, the money, the identity, the initial motivation for his deception. He would throw himself on her mercy and pray that what they had built together was strong enough to survive the truth. But deep down, Nathan knew he was just a coward finding another excuse to delay the inevitable. The day of the cooking competition arrived with a crispness in the air that felt like possibility itself. Nathan woke before dawn, unable to sleep, his mind racing with equal parts excitement for Victoria and dread for what would come after. Today, one way or another, everything would change. He dressed carefully, still in the modest clothes of his assumed identity, though he found himself missing the armor of his custom suits. Ethan was practically vibrating with excitement when Nathan woke him, already chattering about Victoria's big day before his eyes were fully open. "Do you think she'll win, Daddy?" Ethan asked as Nathan helped him into his favorite superhero shirt. "I think she's going to be amazing," Nathan said honestly. "She's been working so hard, and she's such a good cook. But winning isn't everything, buddy. Sometimes just being brave enough to try is the real victory." "But I want her to win," Ethan insisted with the fierce certainty of childhood. "She deserves to win because she's the best." Nathan smiled, his heart aching with love for his son's pure faith. "Then we'll cheer for her as loud as we can, okay?" The competition was being held in a converted warehouse downtown that had been transformed into a massive culinary arena. Rows of cooking stations filled the center floor, each equipped with professional-grade equipment that Nathan knew Victoria had never had access to. Bleachers surrounded the competition area, already filling with spectators eager to watch the amateur chefs battle for their dreams. Nathan and Ethan found seats near the front, close enough to see Victoria at her assigned station. She was already there, her hair pulled back in a practical braid, her hands moving nervously over her ingredients as she organized her workspace. When she spotted them in the crowd, her entire face transformed with relief and joy. "Nathan! Ethan!" She rushed over to the barrier separating the competition floor from the audience. "You came!" "You actually came." "Of course we came," Nathan said, reaching over the barrier to squeeze her hand. "Where else would we be?" "I'm so nervous I think I might throw up," Victoria confessed in a whisper. "There are actual trained chefs here. People who went to culinary school. What am I doing here? I'm just a diner waitress who—" "Victoria." Nathan's voice was firm but gentle. "Look at me." He waited until her anxious green eyes met his. "You belong here just as much as anyone else. Your grandmother taught you something that no culinary school can provide. How to cook with love. Now go out there and show them what that means." Victoria took a deep breath, nodding slowly. Some of the panic receded from her expression, replaced by the determination he had come to know so well. Okay, love on a plate. I can do this. Victoria's going to be the best," Ethan announced loudly, earning smiles from the nearby spectators. She laughed, the sound loosening some of the tension in her shoulders. "From your lips to the judge's ears, little king." She reached over and adjusted the paper crown perched on his head, one she had made him wear for good luck. "Wish me well?" "Good luck," Ethan shouted, waving enthusiastically. Nathan watched her return to her station, his heart swelling with pride and fear in equal measure. She looked small among the professional equipment and experienced competitors, but there was a light in her eyes that outshone everything around her. She was going to give everything she had to this competition, her skill, her heart, her grandmother's memory. And afterward he was going to destroy her trust. The competition unfolded over several hours, each round eliminating competitors until only 5 remained for the final challenge. Nathan watched Victoria navigate each task with growing confidence, her initial nervousness transforming into focused determination. She didn't have the flashy techniques of some competitors or the expensive training of others, but there was something about her food that made the judges lean in, made their eyes close in pleasure, made them reach for second bites when they were supposed to be impartial. By the time the final round arrived, Ethan had fallen asleep against Nathan's shoulder, exhausted by the excitement. Nathan held his son close, watching Victoria prepare her grandmother's stuffed chicken with tears in her eyes and love in every movement. She wasn't just cooking. She was communing with a ghost, with a woman who had raised her and loved her, and given her everything she needed to survive in a world that had been unkind. Every chop of the knife, every stir of the pan, every careful arrangement on the plate was an act of remembrance and gratitude. When she presented her dish to the judges, her voice breaking slightly as she explained what it meant to her, Nathan wasn't the only one in the audience wiping their eyes. This wasn't just food, It was a love letter to a grandmother who had seen potential in an abandoned child and nurtured it into something beautiful. The judges deliberated for what felt like hours. Nathan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure it would wake Ethan. Victoria stood at her station, hands clasped, face pale with hope and fear. And then the announcement came. First place in the soul food cooking competition, winning $50,000 and a full scholarship to the Manhattan Culinary Institute, Victoria Rose. The warehouse erupted in applause. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, as if unable to process what she had heard, and then her face crumpled into tears of joy. Nathan found himself on his feet, cheering so loudly that Ethan startled awake. "Did Victoria win?" Ethan asked groggily. "She won, buddy. She won." Nathan watched Victoria accept her trophy, her hands shaking, her voice trembling as she thanked her grandmother, thanked Rosie, thanked the diner customers who had always encouraged her cooking. And then she looked directly at him and Ethan, and her voice steadied. "And I want to thank the two people who reminded me what it means to cook for people you love. Nathan and Ethan, you came into my life when I needed you most, and you showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choosing each other, every day." Nathan's heart was so full it hurt. This woman, this incredible, talented, loving woman, was thanking him, crediting him with helping her achieve her dreams, and she didn't even know who he really was. The guilt that had been building for weeks finally became unbearable. After the awards ceremony, Victoria found them in the crowd, her trophy clutched to her chest like a child holding a beloved toy. She was still crying, her smile so wide it seemed to split her face. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually did it." "You were incredible," Nathan said, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. "I knew you would be." Ethan threw his arms around both of them, creating an awkward but perfect group embrace. "You're the best chef in the whole world, Victoria," she laughed, kneeling down to kiss Ethan's forehead. "And you're the best cheering section in the whole world." They made their way out of the venue together, Victoria fielding congratulations from strangers who had watched her triumph. Nathan carried a sleepy Ethan on his hip, his free hand intertwined with Victoria's. In that moment, they looked like a family, the family he desperately wanted them to be. "I was thinking," Victoria said as they reached the parking lot, "that we should celebrate. Nothing fancy, I know you're on a budget, but maybe we could have a picnic in the park tomorrow. I could cook for you for once, instead of diner food. Something special. Victoria, Mr. Cole, Mr. Cole. Cole? Mr. The voice came from behind them, sharp and insistent. Nathan's blood turned to ice. He turned slowly, already knowing what he would see. A young woman in a business suit was hurrying toward them, heels clicking on the pavement, tablet in hand. Nathan recognized her immediately. Jennifer, one of his company's PR assistants. He had specifically instructed his staff to leave him alone during this experiment, but clearly someone had spotted him at the competition and decided he needed handling. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry to interrupt," Jennifer said breathlessly, not even glancing at Victoria or Ethan. "But there's a situation at the office that requires your immediate attention. The board is threatening to—" "Jennifer," Nathan's voice was deadly calm. "Not now." But the damage was done. He could feel Victoria's hand going rigid in his, could see the confusion on her face transforming into dawning horror. "Mr. Cole?" she repeated slowly. "She called you, Mr. Cole." Nathan turned to face her, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. "Victoria, I can explain. Nathan Cole." Victoria's voice was distant, as if she were putting pieces together that had never quite fit before. "The Nathan Cole? The billionaire? The one who was just on the cover of Forbes? Please, just let me. You've been lying to me." The words came out flat, emotionless, but her eyes, her beautiful green eyes, were filling with a devastation that cut Nathan to his soul. "This whole time, every conversation, every moment, everything you told me about your life, it was all a lie." "Not everything," Nathan said desperately. "My feelings for you, for Ethan, those were real." "Those are real. Victoria, please, the entry fee." Her voice cracked. "The ingredients, The radio contest. That was you, wasn't it? You've been manipulating my life, pulling strings like I'm some kind of puppet. I was trying to help. You were playing with me. The explosion of anger was almost a relief after the terrible deadness that had preceded it. You came into my diner pretending to be something you're not. You watched me like some kind of experiment. You made me care about you. Her voice broke on a sob. You made Ethan care about me. Oh God, Ethan. She looked at the little boy in Nathan's arms, now fully awake and watching the confrontation with wide, frightened eyes. The pain on her face deepened into something that looked like physical agony. Was any of it real? Victoria demanded. Or was I just auditioning for some role I didn't even know existed? What were you evaluating me for, Nathan, or whatever your real name is? Mother material? Someone to raise your kids so you can go back to your billions and your boardrooms? Victoria, please, if you would just let me explain, what could you possibly explain? She was backing away from him now, putting distance between them as if his very presence was toxic. You're a billionaire who pretended to be poor, who pretended to be struggling, who let me feel sorry for him. She laughed bitterly. God, I was worried about you. I almost gave you money from my tips because I thought you needed it. And the whole time, you were richer than everyone I've ever met combined. I did it for Ethan, Nathan said, his own voice breaking. I needed to find someone who would love him for who he is, not for what I could give them. Everyone who knows about the money treats us differently. You wanted to test me. Victoria's voice was ice now, her tears falling unchecked down her cheeks. You wanted to see if I passed some secret evaluation. Well, congratulations, Nathan. I hope I scored well. She turned and began walking away, her trophy still clutched to her chest like a shield. Victoria, wait. Don't. The word was sharp as a blade. Don't follow me. Don't come to the diner. Don't try to explain. Her voice wavered. I need to never see you again. Nathan stood frozen in the parking lot, watching the woman he loved walk out of his life, his heart crumbling to dust in his chest. In his arms, Ethan began to cry. Daddy, why is Victoria mad? Daddy, what's happening? I want Victoria to come back. Nathan held his son close, tears streaming down his own face, unable to offer any comfort when he had none left for himself. What had he done? The days that followed were the darkest Nathan had experienced since Sarah's death. He returned to his penthouse, the cold, gleaming prison he had been so eager to escape, and found it even more oppressive than before. Every corner seemed to mock him with its emptiness, every expensive piece of furniture a reminder of the lie he had constructed and the love he had destroyed. Ethan was inconsolable. The little boy cried for Victoria every night, asking over and over why she wasn't coming to see them, why they couldn't go to the diner, why Daddy had made her sad. Nathan had no answers that a 5-year-old could understand. How could he explain that he had been so afraid of being used for his money, that he had treated someone else as a means to an end, that in trying to protect his son from shallow people, he had become the shallowest person of all? I miss Victoria, Ethan whispered one night. His small body curled against Nathan's on the too large bed they had started sharing because neither could bear to sleep alone. My heart hurts, Daddy. Mine too, buddy, Nathan admitted, tears sliding silently down his face. Mine too. He tried to reach her. Of course he tried. He sent flowers which were returned unopened. He wrote letters which came back marked return to sender. He even swallowed his pride and contacted Rosie, hoping the older woman might serve as an intermediary. She's hurting, Mr. Billionaire, Rosie said bluntly over the phone, and I warned you this would happen. Now you have to live with the consequences. Please, Nathan begged, desperation stripping away every pretense of dignity. Please, I just need a chance to explain. You had weeks to explain, months. You chose not to. That's on you. There was a pause, and when Rosie spoke again, her voice had softened slightly. Give her time. She's not as angry as she is hurt, and hurt takes longer to heal than anger. But if you push too hard, too fast, you'll lose any chance you might have had. So Nathan waited. He returned to work, but his heart wasn't in it. The corporate battles that had once consumed him felt meaningless now, petty power plays compared to the real stakes he had lost. His board members noticed his distraction, His competitors sensed weakness. But Nathan found he couldn't bring himself to care about market shares and profit margins when the only things that mattered, Victoria and Ethan, were broken because of him. 2 weeks after the competition, Nathan made a decision. He couldn't force Victoria to forgive him, but he could try to make amends in the only way he knew how. He called his lawyers and set up a trust fund in Victoria's name, enough to cover culinary school, enough to help her open her own restaurant someday, enough to ensure she would never have to choose between her dreams and her rent. He made it clear that the money came with no strings, no conditions, no expectations. Whether she ever spoke to him again or not, she would have the resources to build the life she deserved. Then he did something even harder. He wrote her a letter, a real letter this time, not asking for forgiveness or a second chance, but simply telling her the truth, all of it. He wrote about Ethan's question that fateful night. Why don't I have a mommy like the other kids? He wrote about his failures as a father, his obsessive focus on building an empire while his son grew up lonely and longing for connection. He wrote about the women who had seen Ethan as an obstacle, who had made his little boy feel like a burden rather than a blessing. He wrote about walking into Rosie's diner and seeing her for the first time, the warmth in her smile, the kindness in her eyes, the way she made everyone around her feel valued and seen. He wrote about watching her with Marcus, with Ethan, with every lost soul who wandered through those doors looking for something they couldn't name. He wrote about falling in love with her, not because she would make a good mother for his son, though she would, but because she had reminded him what it meant to be human, because she had seen past his disguise to something true underneath, even when the truth he was showing her was a different kind of lie. And finally, he wrote about his shame. His recognition that what he had done was wrong, that no good intentions could justify treating another person as a test subject, that his fear of being used had turned him into a user. He told her that he understood if she never wanted to see him again, that he would respect her wishes, that the only thing he wanted was for her to be happy, with or without him. He sent the letter to the diner, addressed to Victoria, with a note asking Rosie to give it to her when she was ready. Then he waited. Days passed, then weeks. Nathan threw himself into being the father Ethan needed, cutting back his work hours, spending every possible moment with his son. They went to parks and museums and movies, building new memories to layer over the painful ones. He taught Ethan to ride a bike, something he had always meant to do but never made time for. He read bedtime stories every night, doing all the voices, staying until Ethan fell asleep. And slowly, tentatively, his son began to heal. The tears for Victoria became less frequent, replaced by a bittersweet acceptance that children seemed to master more easily than adults. Ethan still talked about her sometimes, still treasured the paper crowns she had made, still asked if maybe someday they could see her again, but the desperate grief had faded into something softer, a sadness that could coexist with joy. Nathan, however, could not seem to find the same peace. Every night, as he lay awake in his too-quiet penthouse, he wondered if Victoria had read his letter, if she had understood, if she had forgiven him, even a little. The not knowing was its own kind of torture, but he had promised to give her space, and he was determined to keep at least one promise to her. It was nearly a month after the competition when his phone rang with an unknown number. Nathan's heart stopped when he heard the voice on the other end. "Nathan, it's Victoria." He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only grip the phone like a lifeline and pray that whatever came next wouldn't destroy him completely. "I read your letter," she continued, her voice quiet and controlled. "All of it. Multiple times, actually. And I've been thinking a lot about what you said. Victoria, Please let me finish. This is hard enough as it is." She took a shaky breath. "What you did was wrong. The lies, the manipulation, the way you watched me like I was some kind of audition. It was wrong and it hurt me in ways I'm still trying to process. You made me care about someone who didn't exist, and that's not something I can just forget." Nathan closed his eyes, bracing for the rejection he had been dreading. "But," Victoria's voice wavered, "I've also been thinking about why you did it. About that little boy who just wanted a mommy. and the father who loved him so much he was willing to completely reinvent himself to find someone worthy of his son. I've been thinking about the man who sat in my diner night after night, not showing off his wealth or his power, but just listening, learning, caring about the people around him in a way that felt real, even if his circumstances weren't. Victoria! I'm not done. There was a hint of a smile in her voice now, and Nathan dared to hope. I've been thinking about Ethan, about his paper crowns and his terrible knock-knock jokes, and the way he hugged me like I was the most important person in the world. I've been thinking about how empty my life has felt without him in it, without both of you. What are you saying? Nathan whispered. I'm saying. Victoria paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. I'm saying that I miss you, both of you, and I'm saying that I'm angry and hurt and confused, but I'm also in love with you, Nathan Cole. The real you, the one who makes mistakes and tries to fix them, the one who loves his son enough to change his whole life, the one who wrote me the most beautiful and honest letter I've ever received. Nathan's tears were falling freely now. I love you too, God, Victoria, I love you so much. I'm so sorry for hurting you. Oh. I'm so sorry for... I know, I believe you. She took a deep breath. But if we're going to try this, if we're going to see if there's something real between us that can survive the lies, we need to start over, completely. No more secrets, no more pretending, no more tests. I need to know the real Nathan Cole, billionaire and all. And you need to trust that I'm not going to change just because I know about the money. Anything, Nathan said fervently. Whatever you need, I'll do whatever it takes. Then come to the diner tomorrow. Bring Ethan. We'll start with coffee and conversation, and we'll see where it goes from there. Tomorrow, Nathan repeated, scarcely daring to believe. We'll be there. There was a pause, and then Victoria's voice came through, soft and vulnerable. And Nathan, bring the real you this time. That's the only version I'm interested in getting to know. The next morning, Nathan stood outside Rosie's diner with Ethan bouncing excitedly beside him. This time, there was no disguise, no assumed identity, no careful calculation of what to reveal and what to hide. He was wearing his real clothes. Expensive, yes, but comfortable. His real watch glinted on his wrist. His real car was parked outside, drawing curious looks from passers-by. He was terrified. Daddy, can we go in now? Ethan tugged at his hand impatiently. I want to see Victoria. I want to show her my new crown. Nathan had let Ethan wear his favorite paper crown, the slightly water-damaged one from that first visit, now reinforced with tape and love. His son had insisted, saying it was his lucky crown, and that Victoria needed to see he had kept it safe. Okay, buddy. Nathan took a deep breath. Let's go. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and Victoria looked up from behind the counter. For a moment they just stared at each other, two people who had built something beautiful on a foundation of lies, now trying to find their way back to truth. Then Ethan broke free from Nathan's grip and ran across the diner, launching himself at Victoria with the uncomplicated joy of a child who had never learned to guard his heart. Victoria! Victoria! I missed you so much. Look, I still have my crown. And Daddy says we can come here every day now if you want, and I learned to ride a bike. And I drew you a picture of all of us together. Victoria caught him, laughing and crying at the same time, holding him close as if she never wanted to let go. I missed you too, little king. So much. Over Ethan's head, her eyes met Nathan's. There was still pain there, still wariness, still the shadows of hurt that would take time to heal. But there was also hope, fragile, tentative, but unmistakably real. Nathan crossed the diner slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to push him away, to decide that this was all a mistake. But she didn't. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Hi, she said softly. Hi, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. You look different in expensive clothes. Is that okay? Victoria studied him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for something only she knew how to find. Then she smiled, not the polished, professional smile he had first seen, but something deeper, more vulnerable, more real. Ed's going to take time, she said. We have a lot to work through, and I can't promise it won't be hard. I know. But I think. She squeezed his hand, and in that simple gesture, Nathan felt the first warmth he had known in weeks. I think it might be worth it. Getting to know the real you, building something true. Ethan, still wrapped around Victoria like a koala, looked up at both of them with the unerring perception of childhood. Does this mean Victoria is going to be my friend forever now? Victoria knelt down to meet his eyes, her hand still holding Nathan's, creating a circle of connection between the three of them. It means we're going to try very hard to be a family, little king, all of us, together. Ethan's face split into a grin so wide it seemed to illuminate the entire diner. That's even better than a friend forever. Nathan felt his heart crack open in the best possible way, not breaking but expanding, making room for the love that was flooding in from all sides. He had come to this diner looking for a mother for his son, and he had found something infinitely more precious, a chance at real happiness, built on honesty and trust and the hard work of truly knowing another person. So, Victoria said, rising to her feet and gesturing toward their usual booth, with a smile that made Nathan's breath catch. Should we start over? I'm Victoria. I work at this diner. I just won a cooking competition, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting into with you two. Nathan smiled, reaching out to cup her face with his free hand, marveling at the miracle of this second chance. I'm Nathan. I have more money than I know what to do with, a son who already adores you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret giving me another chance. That's a good start, Victoria whispered. And then, with Ethan cheering between them, and Rosie watching from behind the counter with tears streaming down her face, Nathan kissed her. It was a kiss of promise and forgiveness, of hope and healing, of two broken people choosing to be brave enough to try again. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria laughed, a sound of pure joy that Nathan knew he would never tire of hearing. Come on, she said, tugging them both toward the booth. I'll make you the best meatloaf you've ever had, and this time you can afford to leave a really big tip. As Nathan slid into the booth with his son on one side and the woman he loved on the other, he realized that this was what he had been searching for all along. Not a mother for Ethan, not a solution to his loneliness, but this, a family built on choice and love, and the messy, beautiful work of truly knowing each other. He took Victoria's hand in his, felt Ethan snuggle against his other side, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. This was only the beginning.